So we're going to make a new project in Unity Hub, new, and call this place and drag. Okay, come on now. And geez Louise, I just updated a new editor. Whatever, doesn't matter. Okay, so first thing we want to do is set this up for AR. So go to Window, Package Manager, and we're going to want to install AR Foundation. And that'll take a minute. And then that should automatically install AR Subsystems as part of that. And then you're going Window Package Manager.
Oh, no, I know that, but where? Oh, here it is.
You can just, in the search bar, type in AR.
What was the other one?
All right, so that installs automatically AR Foundation and AR Subsystems. And then you're going to want, if you have an iOS device, you're going to want to install AR Kit, not face tracking, AR Kit XR plugin. And if you have a Android device, you're going to want to install AR Core XR plugin. Okay, and then AR Kit. What was that?
Last update, October 3rd.
So wait, sorry.
Kit, you have an iOS device. Core if you have an Android. Okay, and then go into File, Build Settings, and click on Player Settings. And then if you're on an iOS device, click on the iOS icon here, not the Android guy. And what do I have to do? I got to pull up my notes because I never remember. You want to put in like a company name. Doesn't matter really. I'm going to call, mine was called ARF Prog, I think is what I called it. And let's see here. What else do you have to do? I know you have to, yeah, requires AR Kit down at the bottom. Requires AR Kit support. And then it says target. AR Kit requires iOS 11 or newer target. Change this 9 to an 11. Is that all we have to do? And architecture to ARM64. Thank you so much.
Sorry, is this in
Other settings, yeah. Architecture, where is that? Oh, okay. Universal, change that to ARM64. And that's all you have to do? Great. Okay, did you guys get all that? ARKit requires ARKit support. Then it tells you, it has a little pop-up thing that says you need to change your iOS version to 11. So right above that is this, that said 9, change that to 11. And then down where it says architecture, right above this like bar here, and from it says universal, change it to ARM64.
Oh,
And then if you're on AR Core, sorry, play. Yes. Yep. And then, so then if you're on Android, you click on the Android settings. And on this one, you just need to get rid of Vulkan from the graphics API because it doesn't like it. And you get rid of multi-threaded rendering. And you change the minimum API level to 7. I believe that's all you have to do on that. Did you get that, Camilo?
No. Very slow.
Okay. All right. So once you got that set up, you can close this. And I'm going to switch platform to iOS. Go ahead and click on the iOS and click switch platform, and that will load what it needs to load into your stuff. Okay. Now let's go ahead and download some assets from the website. So go to the website, AR Programming, and go to week 4. And you don't necessarily have to download 8K Moon because I'm sure you have it already, but download all the other ones. That's the easiest way to do that. Save link as. Does that work? No. You can also just go to this drive link. And is that just that? I thought that was the entire, that was supposed to be the entire directory. Well, crap. So I guess you have to go to each one and then click on download. Is that what this is right here? There we go. That's much easier. Okay. And then how do I download these? Right click, download. Thank you. Zipping 8 files. Why do you bother zipping? Just download them. There's nothing that big. I think the 8K Moon is the biggest file. All right, whatever. Placement. Let's download this one. Scanning for viruses. There's no viruses. There we go. And placement object. I'm having to do mine one at a time, apparently. Placement object with. I hate this name. I had my own version, and then it broke at the last minute, and so I had to go with somebody else's version of this. So it has a terrible name. I apologize for that. What do you mean, open?
Like I can't, it says that there's no app.
Yeah, of course not. We need to import them as assets into our thing. Just
Right.
download them for now.
They're just like white pieces of paper.
No, because probably because you're trying. It doesn't. Your computer doesn't know what a dot prefab is. But Unity does. Okay, so then once you've got those downloaded, then go back into Unity and let's make our asset folders. So create folder. One of these is going to be prefabs. One of these is going to be scripts. One of these is going to be textures. One of them is going to be materials. Is that it? I think so. All right, so then go ahead and go into textures and now go to assets, import new asset, and select the moon, what you just downloaded or from any of your other projects that has the moon in it. Yeah, the 8K moon. So 8K moon 2. Downloaded it like 3 times now. Okay, it should import that. What's taking so long? It's the biggest one. It's the biggest thing. We could also just drag it in there. That would probably work too. Why do I have a spinning wheel? All right, there we go. I believe that's the only texture. And then materials. No, stop it. You broke your computer. Import new asset. Moon and plane detection, both of these, and selection aura. All the dot mats, you can import those. And those go right in, no problem. And then go into prefabs. You can right click and say import new asset and import the prefabs.
You can also select everything.
That's true, you could, and then just put it in the right directory. Otherwise, it's going to go all in the same directory. Okay, and then scripts. So the 2 scripts, the placement with multiple dragging, dropping controller, and placement object. Okay, now there's a few things that are broken that we have to fix. Moon is not looking right because it's missing its texture. So if you double click on moon to open that up, the first thing that's missing is its material. Yeah, so actually go to materials and find the moon material and click on this and reselect the texture for it. And then you can then drag that texture back onto the moon. Saving failed. What are you talking about? Check the console to get more insight.
You're trying to replace it for your prefab. Oh, it's the missing script.
Yes.
Oh, well, we'll fix that in a second. So then go into scripts and find your placement object script, the shorter named one, and drag that onto the sphere child object. Not the selected grandchild and not the moon parent. The sphere child object. The associated script cannot be linked. Why? Oh, we'll just delete that one that says script and has nothing there. All right, mine for whatever reason, I'm just going to remove this component. As long as you can get the new one on there, that should fix that.
So just try to drag it.
Drag the placement object onto the sphere child object, and then if you have a broken script, just right-click and say remove that component. Okay. And what else? Textures, materials. I believe these materials are fine because they're just generated and they don't use any textures. And oh, why does my prefab look weird still? Oh, here we go. Save. There we go. That fixed it. Okay. So just over here, you click on the prefab, and it'll say like open prefab, and then it'll prompt you saying, hey, your prefab's been modified, and just click save. And that fixes it. Okay. And all right, so then go back out of your prefab, back into your main scene, and we need to add our XR objects. So go to XR, and we're going to need an AR session, an AR session origin, okay? So make, did you get that, Char? Add your, go into your sample scene and add your XR AR session and AR session origin objects by going to right click and go to XR and go to AR session and then AR session origin. Okay. And then, yeah, delete the main camera. Delete and go ahead and tag the camera on AR session origin as the main camera. Okay, whoops, I'll put that back on the screen for y'all. Okay. All right, and I like to, you don't have to, but you see all these like weird things on the screen there? Those are called gizmos, and I find them really annoying because they block what I'm trying to see. So you can get rid of those by right-clicking on the, or by clicking on this little arrow next to the gizmos here. Is it right-click? No, it's not. Oh wow, that just turns them off. Well, I guess that works too. I usually go here actually and just on the size here, turn it all the way down. So this little slider here can change the size of those things. What's happening? Okay. All right, we're almost there. The next thing we want to do is add the other script, the placement object with multiple drag. Add that to the AR session origin.
Placement with multiple tracks.
Yeah, it's a terrible name.
Well, right now we're in the
Within
same.
the AR session order.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, get rid of this out of here.
Okay, and that should then be underneath your AR Raycast Manager. Oh, we're gonna need, there's one thing that's not on this that we need, because I guess I forgot to make sure it was added to this script. We need to add a, what is it? AR Plane Manager. To the AR session origin, yeah. And change the detection mode to horizontal. So you can click on it defaults to everything, click on vertical to uncheck it, and then it'll make it horizontal. So add a AR Plane Manager by going to add component and just start typing AR Plane Manager. No problemo. All right. Placed prefab, that's going to be our moon. So go to prefabs and drag your moon object in there. And then AR camera, just drag the AR camera from the AR session origin into this field so that it knows which camera to look at. We could have also done in the script. You could have just referenced the main camera instead of doing it this way, but I didn't get a chance to fix it. I had my own version of this script that was better, and it was working mostly, and then I had a little bug, and I tried to squash the bug, and the whole thing just fell apart like 10 minutes before class started. So I was like, oh well, I'm going with the example script because I can't figure out what happened. I'm out of time. All right, cool. One more thing now, we're gonna do some plane visualization, which is something we haven't done before, and a lot of AR apps use this. Under prefabs, you have one that's called Plane Visualizer. I have two of them for some reason. I don't need this second one. Let's get rid of that. In your prefabs, there's a little cube there that says AR Plane Visualizer if you imported it. If you didn't, then you should import it. But drag that onto this where it says Plane Prefab. Do you not have it, Shar? Okay. Cool. I think that's it. I think that's everything. Let me just check. We're not, yeah, the selection aura was on my script and then it broke. So we'll look at that next week. I'll get the parts that broke working and we'll look at it at the beginning of next week. Cool. All right, so let's look at the scripts here and we'll go over what's going on with them and then we'll build it at the end of class. Okay, so you can go to scripts and double click on your placement with multiple dragging dropping controller. Okay, so there's some things here that are a little bit different than what we do. The convention that I've mostly been teaching you guys is to use public objects, and this guy, the guy I copied this from, he's using private objects that have been serialized, which make them show up in the inspector the same way that public objects do. The difference between a private serialized object and a public object is that a private serialized object, they both show up in the inspector, and they work the same way with putting in values in the inspector or dragging things into the inspector. But the difference between private and public is still the same, which is other scripts won't be able to get access to these variables. So there are lots of times where you would want to be able to set things in the inspector, but you don't want to clutter up all of your public method list with a bunch of stuff that you know you aren't going to be using in other scripts. So technically this is the better way to do it, but I feel like the way that I've been teaching you guys is a little bit easier to understand, so that's the why we've been doing it that way. But suffice it to say, this is not a public script, but it shows up in the inspector. That's basically what's going on with these serialized field. Okay?
Can I edit this? This computer doesn't have Visual Studio. Can I just edit it?
It doesn't? No, you can't add it in Xcode. You'd have to install Visual Studio. I'm surprised that it wasn't installed.
You could open it up in another editor, but you'll lose some functionality.
You could shoot.
I can open this and
Oh, I mean, just for seeing it, it's fine, but
I guess you can edit it in
when nothing's
Xcode.
highlighted, it won't give you red lines.
that's fine.
Yeah, just don't edit in that. You can change it, but just don't.
That's weird because I remember it installing that when I installed.
Oh, it might not be in the Unity preferences.
Oh yeah, that's probably all that is. But okay, so let's go over this. So we have a place prefab. That's going to be what actually gets instantiated when you tap on something. You have a reference to what your AR camera is. You have, this is an array placement object, so it's calling the placement object class that we put inside that child object inside the moon, right? that's a public class, just like this is a public class called placement with multiple dragging, dropping controller. So you can call other classes inside other scripts. I think we talked about that briefly last week. So that's what this is doing. It's instantiating a class of placement object, and it's instantiating it, or it's not instantiating, it's calling it. It's calling a public class of placement object, and it's calling it as an array because this script will let you place multiple different objects, multiple different moons, and be able to move each one based on which one you're tapping on. So it has an array referencing this script that's inside the moon objects. And then it gave it a name for that array called placed objects. Then we have a vector2 touch position equals default. So that's just creating a two-dimensional vector with a 0, 0 for now coordinate, which will be replaced by whatever the position is when you actually touch the screen, right? Then of course we need an AR raycast manager because we're going to be detecting planes, and so you raycast and see if it intersects with a trackable, like a horizontal or a vertical plane. Then we also need a list of AR raycast hits, so that we can determine where you're dragging your finger is intersecting with a raycast or not. I mean, with a detectable plane or not. Then we have a placement object, so last selected object, and that's because you need to keep track of what the last one that you tapped on to see that the next one that you're tapping on is either the same or a different object. And then private bool object instantiated. This is actually something I had to fix in his example code. His example code didn't work right. It would, when you click on the screen, it would just keep instantiating moons no matter where your finger was. And so you'd be like drawing a big like worm of moons, which was kind of cool, but it's not what we were trying to do. So if you wanted to disable this part of the code, you could see the way it was operating, which is like you're basically drawing three-dimensional lines on the planes using instantiated objects. And it works up until you get too many of them, and then it starts to slow down because you have way too many objects in your scene. Okay? Then we have our private game object placed prefab. Why we have that twice, don't we? No, this is a different one. I don't know what the difference is here. Oh, there is a difference. Okay, so this is using a get set method. So we have a serialized game object called placed prefab with a lowercase p. And then we have a completely private game object called placed prefab with an uppercase p. And it's basically getting the lowercase p version and setting the value of this based on that. So it's a little redundant, and you could probably pull this out and just make it a public and not have to deal with this. But this is the method that he used. I think on my version I did get rid of this. But again, like I said, mine broke right before class. All right, so we do this in all of our other things too. The first thing you do on void awake or void start is that you get your component of your AR raycast manager, and you assign that to a object called AR raycast manager or something like that. So then from then on, you can just reference AR raycast manager and get all of the methods that are part of the AR raycast manager class here. Okay. Okay. So then we're into update. So now this is what is happening on every single frame. So the first thing it does is you look for touches. If there's no touch, then you don't do any of this. But you look for a touch. If the touch count is greater than 0, meaning somebody's touched with at least one finger on the screen, then you define a touch structure called touch, and you assign that to input get touch 0. So that means you're looking at the first finger that touched the screen. And then you're defining a vector 2, that touch position that we defined up here, private vector 2 touch position equals default. We're updating that position with the touch dot position that we get from this structure here called touch. So then basically touch position becomes where you touched the screen. Okay. Now we look at the touch phase. You guys remember touch phase? That's whether the touch began or the touch is ending. You can also do touch moving. I think, what's it called? Touch moved. I'm not going to do that. Yeah, you can use moved as well. Okay, so then if there's a new touch that has just began, the first thing I do, and this was another like little hack that I had to do in this script to get it to work the proper way. I say object instantiated equals false. That's that bool that we defined right here that just says, was there an object instantiated on this touch? So the first thing is, if this bool was set to true after the last time you instantiated an object, the first thing you do when your touch ends and you do a new touch is you set that thing to false so that you can instantiate a new moon. But it won't just keep drawing moons if you hold your finger on it. Where was I? Yeah, objects instantiated equals false, so you're ready to draw a new moon. And then we do raycasting. We're using a physics raycast hit, and the first thing we need to do is define a ray, and we're calling that ray, and the ray is looking at the camera, which we defined as AR camera. Remember, we dragged the camera into that so that it knows what camera it's looking at. You could have also just said camera.main here if you wanted, and you wouldn't have had to define that AR camera. Camera dot main, that would have worked just as well, and that's the way I usually do it, but I'll put it back to the way it was for now. I don't want to break it by accident. Okay, raycast hit object. So then we create a list of hits, and we put it in the in this local variable called hit object. And we do physics raycast and output the list of hit objects. And then we look to see if what we hit has a placement object script in it. So last object selected equals the hit object dot transform dot get component placement object. So that placement object script is inside the moon. So if you tapped a moon, this will return something. If you don't tap the moon, if you tap somewhere else, then this will end up with a null list. And we actually look for that down here, and we say if it's null, then instantiate a moon at that object, at that coordinate. Okay, so this is what we do here is we look for placement objects, and we say if the selected object does not equal null, meaning you actually touch something that has this placement object script in it, so something that's already been instantiated, then placement object, okay, so then we create an entire array of all objects that have the placement object script in them, so looking at all of the different moons and determining whether they have the selected Boolean hit And if actually, let's go ahead and open right next to this. Let's open that other script. It's really, really small. So just double click on placement object. It should put it as a tab right next to your other one. And you can see in here, all that's happening is you have a public bool called selected with a capital S. And then this was the selection aura stuff that I ended up not really even using. So
What is TM Pro?
TM Pro. Oh, that was something I excised from the code. We don't need that. It's Text Mesh Pro for doing three-dimensional text, which was original function in this script, and we didn't need it. I forgot to call out this. I culled out all the other code that we weren't using. I just forgot that one. So really, since we're not actually calling either of these scripts or these void functions, which hopefully next week I'll get working and we will actually call these, all you're really doing is looking at this public bool and looking to see, is it selected? Is selected true or is selected false? And if it's false, then that object isn't selected. If it's true, then that object is selected, right? So we look at an entire array of objects that we call all other objects. And this array is composed of all objects that have a placement object in them. And for each of those objects, placement object in all other objects, placement object dot selected equals placement object. So placement object dot selected, this is calling that public bool, and we're setting it, saying we're looking at this placement object here is the current one that we're looking at in the array, and we're setting that to equals last selected object. So if the current one we're looking at is the last selected object, then this equals will return true, and we'll set that as selected object. If it's not, because it's cycling through the array, and the one that you tapped on, the one it's looking at is not the one you tapped on, then it will set that is selected, or this selected bool, as false. Okay, does that make sense? It's a little bit complicated because you have two different equals here.
Can I break this down in like words for myself
Sure.
real quick?
Yeah.
So this thing, you're tapping on a screen
Uh-huh.
and you're making moons.
Yeah.
If you like tap a moon you already created,
Yeah.
This array here is like looking at all the moons you made, recognizing that you're tapping this one right now,
Yeah.
and making it last selected object.
Yeah. When you tap on it,
Thank you.
it makes it the last selected object, right? Because we did last selected object equals the hit object transform get component placement object. So that becomes the last selected object. Now, if the current one, when you cycle through the entire array of objects that have the placement object script in them, you set the bool of selected as, is this current object that we're looking at equal to what you had specified as last selected object when you tapped it? So that means the one that you tapped. So if it is the one that you tapped, then that returns true. Otherwise, it returns false.
So if you're not looking at the moon that you just tapped, it's false.
Exactly. When it's cycling through all those objects in the array, because we're using a for each loop. So when it's cycling through all of those, which it does very fast, it does it in less than a frame. Whatever one you didn't tap on, all of the ones that you didn't tap on will set the dot selected as false. And the one that you did tap on will set the dot selected as true.
Okay.
Make sense?
Yes.
Yeah, it's a little convoluted, but it works.
What's the end goal for all this? I forget if you said.
So it's to move it if it's selected.
I see. So with one tap you initiate, and then you can drag it.
It's if you tap on an empty place, you can instantiate a new moon,
Got it. Okay.
and you can have as many moons as you want, and still be able to subsequently move them.
Okay.
By creating a library of things that have the placement object script in it and cycling through that. or sorry, an array of things that have that placement object script and cycling through that array. Okay, so then when the touch phase ends, you brought your finger up, then set the last selected object to false, so nothing is selected. Otherwise, you would that would remain selected, and the next time you tapped on something, it would move 2 things. And we don't want that. And then the next time it would move 3 things. Like you'd end up having all of them move. Yeah. Okay. No, I mean, you can hack this however you feel like. Okay, so then we actually that was physics raycasting. We still haven't done any AR raycasting yet. This is where we do AR raycasting, and this is still under the umbrella of if touch count is greater than 0. So when you touch it, it does first this physics raycasting stuff, and then calls the AR raycast manager and does the AR raycasting stuff, and does touch position, hits, trackable type plane within polygon. And actually, the way we usually do this, and the way I've done this before, is this one is calling this entire thing here. You could also up here, instead of doing it that way, I could say using Unity engine.xr.ar subsystems. Why did that not work? What did I do wrong? Engine. There we go. And then I could, instead of having all of this, I could just say trackable type and get rid of that part. So that's just coding preference. Some people like to type a bunch of things out over and over again. Some people like to just type it out once at the top. I'm one of those. Trackable type plane within polygon. This means you're only going to be able to place a moon in where you've scanned the flat plane, instead of the other one, which we have been using in the past, is where we just detect a plane, and once it calculates that plane, it makes that plane infinitely large, and you could put it into places you haven't scanned. This one will only put it into places that you have scanned, and you'll see when we actually run this thing that it starts building out a polygon and shows you that polygon on the ground, showing you where you've scanned. Where were we? Polygon. Okay, great. So then we have, what time is it? 3:33. All right. Yeah, that's what I thought. No way would we ever be able to code this in the amount of time we had. Okay, so then we get the pose. We start with a pose called hit pose, and that is getting the pose from this AR raycast hit. So basically the pose is where it hit the trackable plane, what that position and rotation is. Mainly we're just using position. So hits that pose. And then we look at the last selected object again, and we say if last selected object equals null, meaning what you tapped on is not a moon, then we're going to actually put a moon down. But this is the part I had to hack and add. And object is not instantiated. Object instantiated, not object instantiated, meaning you haven't just placed a moon. Go ahead and place a moon. Otherwise, if you just placed the moon in the last frame and your finger's still down, don't just keep drawing moons. That's basically what that's saying. Exactly. So if you took that out, you'd have the line of moons, right?
That's what you added to his code.
Yes. All right, so last selected object. So that's the coordinates that you tapped on, and this is based on this not being where a moon is. Then go ahead and instantiate the placed prefab at the hit pose.position, at the position that it hit the trackable plane, and with the rotation of the trackable plane, and get the component of the placement object. I'm not even sure why that needs to be there, but I think it needs to be there so that it adds it to the list. I'm not sure. Not sure exactly why this placement object needs to go there. All right. And then after you've instantiated a single moon, then set the object instantiated as true so that you don't keep drawing moons. Okay? Else. So if it equals null, then place a moon. If it's not null, if there's a moon there, then if the object selected is the last object selected, then change the transform position to your current hit pose position. So move the moon along the detected plane, right? And that we have to do that through AR Raycast Manager and not through the physics Raycast because we want to move it around the plane. And so you need to deal with something that's dealing with that plane, and that's the AR Raycast Manager. Okay, does that make sense, more or less?
Yeah.
All right, I think we're ready to build it. So I think I can show you this if I create my own network.
We don't need the placement object.
Hmm?
We're all
You-
good with-
Placement object should be inside of your moon object, right?
I just have a sphere on my lid object. Do I need something else to fix that?
No, as long as your sphere has the, it's supposed to have that hierarchy so that it places it without it being halfway buried into the plane. So that's one thing that if you don't have, it may bury it in the plane halfway.
But like the selection aura and all of that stuff doesn't need to be in my.
Oh, you have the prefab, you just don't have the moon texture. Is that what you're saying?
No, I have the moon texture.
Does the moon need to be in our hierarchy? I thought it was just a prefab that we attached to the script.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't want to be a placed object. It doesn't want to be in your hierarchy because you don't want it to be there when you start the script. I mean, when you start running, why won't that go?
So I should erase that.
Yeah, do you have like
It should just be a prefab that you instantiate.
in a prefab, but in like AR session version, do you have
So that needs to be
put
there.
the moon there, put AR camera there. It goes in place prefab. Right there, yeah.
Oh, and I put Eric in there. Why didn't it stay?
And then plain prefab is the other prefab.
This one.
No, this one.
Which one is this one?
Going to
Right. So the script placement with multiple.
Okay, so then we're gonna build Unity build settings. Make sure you're switched platform to iOS, and just say build. And I like to add a new folder called builds and then save it as iOS or Android if you're doing an Android version.
What is this game called?
It's called Place and Drag. It should have been named when you created the project. Place and Drag.
Place you and drag, and you and drag. That would be fun.
What happened to my? E5 player or something, what is it called? $5K player. It crashed, so I gotta try it again. Running. Oh, I'm not connected to my network, that's why. Connect to my network, Wi-Fi, Jackson's MacBook Pro, screen mirroring. There we go. Cool. All right. So I got my iOS project, so now I open that in Xcode. And then if you try to build yours Vania, you'll actually have to you'll have to add your account to Xcode on that computer if you're doing it on that computer. This is so much faster with Android. You just say like build and run, and it just does it. Well, when the cable's working right. Sometimes my cable, it doesn't want to show that I have my computer attached to it, and that's really annoying. All right, and then I need to go to signing and set this to Jackson. The operation couldn't completed. What? Oh, because I'm not logged in. Damn it. All right. I can't create my own network and be connected to the internet at the same time. Well, I'll have to get it uploaded to my program first and then screen share from there. Okay. So Vania, if you want, you can go into accounts here and add your Apple ID to be able to upload. Okay, so then go ahead and build it if you can. I've got a little bit of issues I'm trying to sort out. Oh, that's going to take more time than we have. You'd like to think so. The first half goes very fast, and the last quarter takes like 45 minutes. I don't know.
I'm supposed to click on Unity iPhone Xcode project, right? And that's the only one.
Yes. Yeah.
I guess it's just doing this now. It's more than the user version.
Apparently.
My computer's like, wait.
Yeah, but I still have. I'm not. All right. Whatever. I guess I can screencast to my computer without creating my network because I don't have my network created and I'm still screencasting, so that's good. All right, I'm building. So is yours working? Oh, that means we forgot to plug in. Yeah, so it's working. Great. We just forgot to plug in one thing on yours to get the plain prefab on there correctly. We forgot to set up that material with its texture.
Oh.
But yes, that is. It's just it has a setting that's wrong. Let me look at mine. Mine's probably going to be the same way. So in materials, plain. Actually, what is it? It's prefabs in AR Plane Visualizer. Prefab. You have to one of these somewhere. Where is it? I think it's called like Element 0, missing material. We got to plug in that material. So the material is plane detection material. Whoops, but now I clicked on it. I lost my spot. So you go to plane prefab, AR Plane Visualizer prefab, and right here under Mesh Render Element 0, missing material, drag your gray material into that field. Where did it go? Element 0. There it is. There. That'll fix that. In the AR Plane Visualizer prefab. So if you go into that cube that says AR Plane Visualizer, click on that, double click on that so that it brings it up. And then you see down here where it says element 0 missing material.
So your gray plane detected one?
Yeah. Running. Place and drag. I think I need to like, I gotta verify this thing. Let's see, what do I have to do for that? Because I accidentally changed my, how do I do verifications? I always forget this. I know, this is another thing. Development managers, this app will not, okay, well how do I verify it? An internet connection is required. Okay, I thought I was connected to the internet. Oh, I'm not. I'm connected to my MacBook, that's why. There we go. Hey, and I'm still, okay, great. So, yeah, so I forgot to assign that material too, so my detected plane is pink because it's telling me I'm missing the material, but I should be able to put moons on it and drag those moons in the thing. And there's also a bug in this where they're buried halfway into the material. That's something I need to solve for next week. I think I had it solved in my version before it broke. So there we go. We have the dragging and the placing. I just need to be able to add pinch to zoom it, to change its scale. And I have the functionality for that, but I haven't been able to crack how to, I think instead of, what you'd have to do to make that work is instead of just tapping or tapping on something to move it, you have to tap on something and then it'll create that selected object, and that's why I had the aura to show you which one was selected. And then it would allow you to pinch in and out to change its size, and then you could tap on nothing to deselect. That's the idea anyway. Okay, so if I built this again with the correct texture, you would see it's like a kind of a gray, half transparent thing instead of this ugly pink. But it's already 350, so we'll call it good. All right, cool. Let me just review the homework again. So you can use this script in your homework. You don't have to use this script. You can go back to the more simple placement indicator, single object or multiple object thing. You don't have to have dragging in your homework for next week. But I do have some specific requirements, and we'll look at that again. So I call this time to fly because I want you to try something new on your own. I mean, if you get stumped, that's why Mark is here. That's why I'm here almost every day on campus, because I'm staff. So make an appointment with me, please. And I will help you over whatever hurdle. And his office hours are on Mondays from 12:30 to 2. 12:30 to 2 on Monday. All right. So place an object or multiple objects with taps on a valid plane. You know, we've been doing that since week 2, I believe. The object should be something other than what we've previously used in class. So no more moons. Make something interesting. I'd like something more than just a cube or a sphere also. I'd like you to import some kind of 3D object or do a collection of primitives that look like something. You can use prefabs to make like a stick figure or something. That's fine. Physics raycast to toggle a script attached to the object, like the scripts that we use to make the moon rotate in week 3, I believe. You could do that, but don't something other than the moon rotating. So go online and figure out some animation that you can toggle in a script. Maybe it gets bigger and smaller. Maybe it moves to left and right. Maybe it bounces up and down. Something that's different than what we've done before. And at least one interactive element that we haven't ever done before in class. I want you to try to research and figure out how to do something for yourself. So maybe sounds coming from the objects. Maybe clicking on it triggers a video that plays over the scene. Maybe the movement distance between the camera and the object creates movement in the object. Okay? Or something else that I haven't thought of, but be creative. All right? And then again, if you get stuck or you're just like throwing your hands up, please don't throw your hands up. Come make an appointment with me and I'll help you over whatever hurdle you're stuck on. Okay? Great.
Thanks, Jeff.